Hello everybody, welcome to my channel.
Gerald Ford, a concise biography. Gerald Rudolph Ford Jr., born Leslie Lynch King Jr., July 14, 1913 to December 26, 2006, was the 38th President of the United States and the only person to hold both the Vice Presidency and Presidency without being elected to either office. His tenure is often remembered for restoring a measure of stability and trust following one of the most turbulent political periods in American history. Early life and education. Ford was born in Omaha, Nebraska, but after his parents separated, he moved with his mother to Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was renamed after his stepfather, Gerald R. Ford Sr., and grew up in a modest, middle-class household. Athletic and disciplined, Ford attended the University of Michigan, where he became a star football player and was offered professional contracts. Instead, he chose academics and public service, later earning his law degree from Yale University. Military service and entry into politics. During World War II, Ford served in the U.S. Navy as a lieutenant commander aboard the aircraft carrier USS Monterey. After returning home, he entered politics, winning a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives in 1948. Ford served 25 years in Congress, eventually becoming House Minority Leader. He gained a reputation as a moderate Republican, known for integrity, practicality, and loyalty to institutions rather than personal ambition. Vice Presidency. Ford became Vice President in 1973 under the 25th Amendment after Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned amid scandal. Ford was widely seen as a safe and stabilizing choice because of his uncontroversial political history and personal honesty. 38th President of the United States, 1974 to 1977, Ford became president on August 9, 1974, upon Richard Nixon's resignation over the Watergate scandal. During his first address, Ford famously said, "Our long national nightmare is over." Almost immediately, Ford faced a defining moment. He granted a full presidential pardon to Nixon, arguing that the nation needed to move forward rather than remain consumed by the scandal. The decision was deeply controversial at the time and is believed to have contributed to his 1976 election loss. But later historians often view the pardon as a courageous choice that prioritized national healing. Ford focused on restoring faith in government institutions, addressing economic instability, including inflation and recession, continuing Cold War diplomacy, and maintaining détente with the Soviet Union. His domestic policy faced challenges, especially the economic crisis of stagflation, a rare combination of unemployment and inflation. 1976 election and later life. Ford ran for a full term in 1976 but narrowly lost to Democratic candidate Jimmy Carter. After leaving office, Ford stayed active in public affairs, wrote memoirs, served on corporate boards, and became a respected elder statesman. He passed away in 2006 at the age of 93. Legacy. Gerald Ford is remembered for his steady, honest presence during a constitutional crisis. While not known for sweeping legislation or dramatic political vision, he is often praised for placing national interest above personal political gain, restoring trust and dignity to the presidency, demonstrating calm leadership during instability. Ford once summarized his presidency in humble terms: "I am a Ford, not a Lincoln." Despite the modesty of the quote, history often views him as a man who helped steer the country back toward stability when it desperately needed a steady hand. Gerald Ford. Detailed biography. Early life and family background. Gerald Ford was born Leslie Lynch King Jr. on July 14, 1913, in Omaha, Nebraska. His biological father was abusive, And after his mother, Dorothy Gardner King, fled the marriage, she later remarried Gerald R. Ford, a paint salesman in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Young Leslie took on his stepfather's name and grew up unaware of his biological father until adolescence. Ford often credited his mother and stepfather for providing a stable, disciplined, and supportive upbringing. Their influence shaped his strong moral compass, modesty, and commitment to honesty, traits that later became central to his political identity. Education, football, and law school. Ford attended South High School in Grand Rapids and excelled academically and athletically. At the University of Michigan, he became a national football star and helped the Wolverines win 2 national championships, 1932 and 1933. His teammates described him as hardworking rather than naturally gifted, someone who succeeded through discipline and perseverance. After graduating in 1935, Ford turned down offers from the Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers to pursue law and public service. He worked part-time at Yale University while coaching football and boxing and earned his law degree in 1941. World War II military service. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Ford enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He served aboard the aircraft carrier USS Monterey in the Pacific Theater. During a typhoon in 1944, massive waves nearly swept him overboard, a moment he later described as one of the most harrowing of his life. Ford was honorably discharged in 1946 with the rank of lieutenant commander. Rise in politics. After the war, Ford returned to Grand Rapids and opened a law practice. Encouraged by local Republicans and driven by a belief that government should be honest and accountable, he ran for Congress in 1948 and won. He served in the U.S. House of Representatives for 25 years, a remarkable career in Congress. During that time, he became known as a consensus builder rather than a partisan flamethrower. Served on the Warren Commission, which investigated the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Became House Minority Leader in 1965. He did not have presidential ambitions. His dream was to become Speaker of the House. Vice Presidency, 1973-1974. Ford became Vice President in December 1973 under Section 2 of the 25th Amendment after Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned amid financial scandal. His confirmation was notable because he was not chosen through an election. Congress overwhelmingly approved him due to his reputation for integrity. Both parties trusted him, a rare phenomenon in Washington. 38th President of the United States, 1974 to 1977, becoming president on August 9, 1974. Richard Nixon resigned due to the Watergate scandal. Ford was sworn in immediately. His first speech included one of the most memorable lines in presidential history: "Our long national nightmare is over." At that moment, the United States was shaken. The public had lost faith in the presidency. Ford's calm, straightforward demeanor made him an ideal figure to restore stability. The Nixon pardon. Only 1 month into office, Ford granted Nixon a full pardon for any crimes he might have committed while president. The decision was politically costly. Ford's approval ratings plunged and many Americans accused him of a corrupt bargain. Ford defended the decision as necessary for the country to heal. The Nixon pardon was the most difficult decision of my political life. Over time, many historians and political figures, including Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy, acknowledged that Ford's decision likely spared the country years of political division. Domestic policy and economic challenges. Ford's presidency coincided with severe economic problems. The nation faced stagflation, high unemployment combined with high inflation, a situation few economists had ever seen. Ford launched a public campaign called Whip Inflation Now, attempting to encourage personal responsibility and reduce consumer spending. The campaign was widely mocked, but it reflected Ford's belief in limited government intervention. He frequently vetoed spending bills, believing excessive government spending fueled inflation. Ford issued 66 vetoes, and the Democratic-controlled Congress overrode only 12 of them. Foreign policy: Ford continued Nixon's policy of détente with the Soviet Union and played a key role in the final stages of the Vietnam War. Key events: in April 1975, the U.S. evacuated more than 7,000 people from Saigon during the city's fall. Ford signed the Helsinki Accords, 1975, promoting cooperation and human rights in Eastern Europe. While he lacked Nixon's deep foreign policy expertise, Ford managed to maintain global stability during turbulent times. 1976 election. Ford won the Republican nomination after a bitter primary battle with Ronald Reagan. In the general election, he ran against Jimmy Carter. When asked during a debate if Eastern Europe was under Soviet domination, Ford mistakenly said it was not, a comment that hurt his credibility. Carter narrowly defeated him. Life after the White House. After leaving office, Ford remained politically active and became known as a respected elder statesman. He refused to criticize successors publicly, believing that former presidents should not interfere with current administrations. He divided his time between Rancho Mirage, California, and Vail, Colorado. Ford wrote memoirs, gave speeches, and served on several boards and nonprofit organizations. He died on December 26, 2006, at age 93, at the time, the longest-lived former president in U.S. history. Legacy: Gerald Ford left behind a legacy defined not by ambition, but by duty and honor. He is remembered for restoring trust in the presidency after Watergate, governing with honesty and humility, making extremely difficult decisions in the interest of national healing among historians and political analysts. His reputation has risen significantly over time. Ford himself summarized his presidency best: "I tried to make the office of the president one of dignity, not of spectacle." Despite his short time in office, his steady leadership provided the country with something priceless during crisis: normalcy. Gerald Ford, expanded biography, in-depth narrative, roots and formative years. Gerald Ford's life began amid instability. Born Leslie Lynch King Jr., his parents' marriage dissolved within weeks because of abuse and violence from his biological father. His mother bravely left Nebraska and returned to Michigan, where she eventually married a gentle, hard-working paint salesman named Gerald R. Ford. Ford later said that his stepfather was his hero, providing the moral and emotional foundation he needed. Years later, Ford discovered his original birth name on a legal document, a shock to him, but one that deepened his appreciation for the man who raised him. A young man of two passions, athletics and discipline. At the University of Michigan, Ford earned a reputation not just as a strong athlete, but as someone who embodied teamwork and grit. His football coach, the legendary coach Fritz Crisler, admired Ford's work ethic more than his natural ability. Ford's persistence became part of his character, a trait that would define his political career. To afford Yale Law School, Ford worked several jobs, including waiting tables and coaching sports. His story is a classic example of the American dream achieved through perseverance rather than privilege. A crucible at sea. World War II tested Ford not intellectually, but physically and emotionally. Serving aboard the aircraft carrier USS Monterey, Ford narrowly avoided death when a massive hurricane struck the ship in December 1944. A wave hit the flight deck, knocking several men overboard. Ford slipped, sliding toward the edge, only grabbing a small metal railing at the last second. Reflecting on that day, Ford said, "I prayed to God that I would see another sunrise." The experience strengthened his faith and deepened his sense of purpose. Congressman Ford, the loyal workhorse. In 1948, Ford ran for Congress, promising, "I will be honest. I will be transparent. I will be accessible." He kept that promise. In Congress, Ford handled constituent letters, personally announced his votes, publicly visited every neighborhood of his district regularly. Unlike many politicians, Ford did not see public office as a path to power. He was driven by a belief that government should serve, not rule. He earned a reputation for plain-spoken honesty, bipartisan cooperation, fairness in committee leadership. During his time on the Warren Commission, investigating President Kennedy's assassination, Ford took meticulous interview notes by hand. He wanted a complete historical record. The unexpected Vice President Ford never sought the vice presidency. He was thrust into the role because of his reputation for honesty at a moment when the Nixon administration needed credibility. Senators from both parties trusted him. Many called him the Boy Scout of Congress. He accepted the position reluctantly but with a sense of duty. The presidency. Trial by fire. A nation in crisis. On August 9, 1974, Ford took the oath as the 38th President of the United States. He inherited a nation traumatized by Watergate, a damaged presidency, a mistrustful public, an economy in decline. Ford's first words to the American people became iconic. "Our Constitution works." These were not just words, Ford intended to prove them. The Nixon pardon. Ford's defining moment. The decision to pardon Nixon is one of the most controversial acts in presidential history. Ford believed that a prolonged trial, media mania, and public obsession with Nixon would cripple the nation. Ford never regretted the decision. Years later, Senator Ted Kennedy, once one of Ford's harshest critics, admitted, "You were right." In 2001, Ford received the Profiles in Courage Award for putting the nation's healing above his political future. A presidency under siege. Ford faced the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Prices soared, unemployment rose, and the stock market collapsed. Ford believed government spending was the problem, not the solution. His veto record was extraordinary. 66 vetoes in 895 days, one of the highest veto rates in U.S. history. Ford once joked, "I'm a Ford, not a Lincoln, but I do know how to apply the brakes." Foreign policy. Quiet strength. Ford continued the Cold War détente, but he also made decisions that required courage and resolve. Key events: Helsinki Accords, 1975. Strengthened human rights policies in Soviet-controlled Europe. Fall of Saigon, 1975. Ordered a massive airlift to rescue Americans and Vietnamese refugees, including orphans. One photo from Operation Babylift, Ford holding an orphaned Vietnamese baby, became a symbol of compassion. Personal life. Down-to-earth and respectful. Ford's marriage to Elizabeth Betty Bloomer was one of mutual support and authenticity. Betty Ford's openness about addiction and breast cancer turned her into a powerful advocate for millions. The Betty Ford Center, founded later, revolutionized addiction treatment and destigmatized rehab. Ford's personal interests included skiing in Vail, golfing with friends, quiet evenings, reading history. He disliked the pomp of the presidency, once saying, "I like being in the Oval Office, I just don't like being trapped in it." After the presidency, Ford retired gracefully. No bitterness, no political maneuvering. He remained respectful to successors, active in charitable causes, a symbol of decency. He and Betty Ford became beloved elder statespersons. Ford died on December 26, 2006, eulogized as the man who restored integrity to the presidency. Legacy. Gerald Ford is remembered as a president who did not seek power, but answered when called. A leader who valued healing over politics. A man whose honesty became his influence. Historians increasingly praise Ford's courage, restraint, and decency. His presidency demonstrated that sometimes the greatest leadership is found in calm steadiness, not in dramatic change. He made us believe again. Former President George H.W. Bush. Gerald Ford, the accidental president who stabilized America. A presidency born of crisis. Ford took office at a time when the United States was in a historic low point. The Watergate scandal shattered public trust. The economy was imploding, inflation hit double digits. The Vietnam War had eroded confidence in government and foreign policy. The nation was psychologically exhausted. Ford's presidency, therefore, was not about building something new, it was about repairing what was broken. Historian John Robert Greene wrote, "Ford did not seek greatness, greatness sought him. Most presidents are judged by what they create. Ford is judged by what he prevented, a constitutional breakdown and a prolonged national crisis." Ford's leadership style. The anti-Nixon Richard Nixon was strategic, secretive, and political. Gerald Ford was the opposite. Transparent instead of calculating, direct instead of strategic, governed by instinct rather than ambition. Where Nixon saw enemies, Ford saw co-workers. Where Nixon centralized power, Ford distributed responsibility. Ford believed the White House should be a place of honesty, not fear. He replaced Nixon's secretive environment with open-door meetings and press accessibility. Journalists described Ford's briefing room as shockingly normal. The power of humility. Ford's natural humility was so striking that some foreign leaders were surprised by it. During their first meeting, Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev gave Ford the Cold War equivalent of a test. He offered him a car. Ford politely declined. "I don't accept personal gifts as President of the United States." Brezhnev was stunned. He wasn't used to dealing with a leader who placed ethics above personal benefit. Domestic policies. In-depth economic turmoil. When Ford took office, the U.S. was experiencing high inflation, high unemployment, rising energy costs. This rare combination, stagflation, confused economists and broke traditional economic theories. Ford believed inflation was the enemy of ordinary Americans. Inflation attacks the poor, the elderly, and the powerless. His response, fiscal restraint. He vetoed 66 spending bills, arguing that Washington needed discipline. Whip inflation. Now a public campaign encouraging energy conservation and responsible spending. The public mocked the win buttons, but Ford stood by the principle, government cannot fix what people won't change. Tax rebate. He proposed one of the first modern federal tax rebate programs to stimulate consumer spending without creating long-term spending increases. Though not dramatic, these efforts slowed inflation and restored fiscal responsibility. Foreign policy. In-depth. Helsinki Accords, 1975. Perhaps Ford's most historically important achievement. Signed by 35 nations, including the Soviet Union, officially recognized borders in Europe but required Eastern Bloc countries to protect human rights. At the time, critics claimed Ford was soft on communism. History proved the opposite. The Accords inspired dissident movements in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and East Germany. Václav Havel, later president of the Czech Republic, said, "Helsinki was the beginning of the end of Soviet domination." Vietnam. The painful end. When Saigon fell on April 30, 1975, Ford faced the moment every post-World War II president feared. Congress refused additional military aid. Ford made a final plea to the American people. America cannot and must not turn its back on those who believed in us. Though the war ended, Ford personally oversaw the mass evacuation of American personnel, South Vietnamese allies, and over 2,000 orphans, Operation Babylift. Photos of Ford holding a Vietnamese baby became symbols of compassion rather than defeat. 2 assassination attempts. In 17 days in September 1975, 2 women attempted to assassinate Ford. Lynette Squeaky Fromm, a follower of Charles Manson, pointed a gun at Ford at close range. The gun misfired. Sarah Jane Moore attempted to shoot him in San Francisco. A bystander knocked her arm aside, and the shot missed. Ford returned to work the next morning as if nothing had happened. He refused to let insecurity or fear influence his leadership. "I will not govern from behind bulletproof glass." Ford after the presidency he did not seek influence or fame, instead, he embraced the role of the elder statesman. Ford made it a point to support newer presidents. He believed that there's only one president at a time. He and Jimmy Carter, once political opponents, became close friends. Carter later called Ford, "the most decent man I ever met in politics." Final years and legacy. Ford lived to 93, at that time the longest-lived U.S. president. He received the Profiles in Courage Award for the Nixon pardon. Ford's legacy is now viewed more favorably than when he left office. Historians now call him the healer, the honest president, the right man at the right time. One quote captures Ford perfectly. He was not elected by the people, but he was elected by history. Gerald Ford. Expanded deep dive. A president without pretense. Gerald Ford's presidency is one of the rare examples in American history where a leader assumed power without seeking it, and that became the source of his credibility. Ford's style was unusually normal. He walked through the White House carrying his own briefing folders, wearing casual sweaters, and personally answering questions from staff, something unimaginable during Nixon's administration. Journalists later said, Ford brought the country a president who looked like an actual human. Psychological profile of Ford as a leader. Ford was shaped by 4 key traits. Normalcy. He did not see himself as special. He said, "I have an ego, but I hope it's a healthy one." Integrity. He followed rules and expected others to do the same. Emotional resilience. His early childhood trauma, fleeing from his biological father, gave him internal strength. Confidence without arrogance. He believed that honesty is not a strategy. It is a way of life. Unlike Nixon or LBJ, he did not twist power to his advantage. He used authority reluctantly. Little-known stories and anecdotes. Small Diamond. Ford in the Secret Service staircase incident. Ford was known for athleticism, yet he became a national joke after stumbling down the stairs of Air Force One in the rain. What the public didn't know, the stairs were wet and slippery. Ford insisted on holding his own umbrella and refused arm assistance. He later laughed at himself, showing humility. "That's not the worst slip I ever had. I slipped going into the presidency too." Small Diamond. The Peanut Story. Friendship with Carter. After losing to Jimmy Carter, Ford sent Carter a handwritten note before inauguration. "I am ready to help in any way possible." Years later, Carter wrote, "He was the best friend I ever had in political life." Their families vacationed together. The media called them the odd couple of American politics. Small Diamond. Ford versus Ronald Reagan. An early GOP identity crisis. In 1976, Reagan challenged Ford for the Republican nomination. The party split. Ford Republicans, moderate, pragmatic, bipartisan. Reagan Republicans, ideological, conservative, anti-government. Ford won the nomination by just 1 vote. At the convention, Ford invited Reagan to speak, and
Bye bye, thanks for watching, bye.